deprivation is something we have all faced at one point, especially here in Korea. But, can we actually catch up on lost sleep? That is the big question. Well, recent research has unveiled that catching up on sleep, particularly over the weekends, may do more than just make us feel refreshed. But then, back in the day, I don't know about you, but I always thought you can't catch up on sleep. So let's find out more. We have invited Professor Elizabeth B. Klerman, Professor of Neurology at Harvard Medical School, and she's going to give us the lowdown on all of this. So let's say hi to her. Hi, Professor. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Catherine. Thank you very much for asking me to speak with you.
Yes. So, Dr. Klerman, if you can explain the recent research on catching up on sleep, because back in the day, we always heard, you should try to get your daily intake because you can't really catch up on it. But now it's not true?
So sleep has many purposes, and it may be that you can catch up on some of the sleep purposes of sleep by sleeping more, and others are harder to do. So most people think that the reason they sleep is so they can feel alert the next day. So if you get more sleep, you're more likely to feel alert the next day. You're more likely to feel happier or less irritable. So those measures of sleep deprivation can be made up with a couple days of extra sleep. The question is whether long-term effects of insufficient sleep can be made up, and we don't really know that. And some of the long-term effects are things like obesity or prediabetes or dementia. And we don't really know because those studies take many, many years. On the other hand, I would suggest if you have a chance to sleep, and it's a safe place to sleep, obviously, you should sleep.
I get it.
You can't sleep too much. If you are tired and you can sleep, you should sleep. It's not like chocolate cake that you can eat or I eat when I'm not hungry. Mm-hmm. There's no evidence that you could sleep more than what your body needs.
Really? That's so interesting because, I don't know, maybe our parents said, back in the day said you're being lazy, don't sleep too much or something like that. So you're saying it's okay, whatever our bodies can handle, that's enough.
Yes, whatever your bodies can handle, that's enough. For adolescents, sometimes parents think that the kids are sleeping in too late. Partially that's because adolescents tend to be later types, more owl type than younger people.
Yes.
Older people. Sorry. Well, both kids, younger kids and older people. And I think maybe that's why parents thought that the kids were sleeping too much because they were sleeping till noon or 1 a.m. on a non-school day. I would suggest let the kids sleep because they need to sleep and they probably haven't gotten enough sleep during the school week.
Oh, interesting. So how does catching up on sleep during the weekends kind of work to alleviate the effects of, I don't know, this accumulated sleep debt? Is this a thing?
Yes, there is accumulated sleep debt. Mm-hmm. And if you get more sleep, then the debt is less. It may take more than a week. We don't really know. And it may be different for mood or performance or heart disease or diabetes. We don't really know how long each of them takes, and it may differ by individuals. Some people seem to do really well with very little sleep, and some people don't do well. The general advice, I'm sorry, yes, please.
Oh, yeah. So speaking of that, what you just said, Dr. Klerman, about some people, they do okay on fewer hours of sleep versus someone who may not. How can we know if, for example, the experts say, you need 7 to 8 hours of sleep per night, but, is it okay for certain people? Maybe they can get away with 6 hours. It's okay?
So when I'm asked this question, I usually ask the person, do you need an alarm clock to wake up? Because if you need an alarm clock, by definition, you're not getting enough sleep. I ask, how much sleep do you get on a day or a weekend or a vacation where you don't have to get up and you don't have a dog or a child or something that you have to go to? How much sleep do you get then? When do you go to sleep and when do you wake up? Dr. Till Ronenberg, who studies sleep and biological rhythms in Germany, compares using an alarm clock to stopping a washing machine before it's done. No, why would you stop a washing machine when it's still rinsing or cycling or drying or whatever? The same thing as your body. One of the things that happens during sleep is your body removes some of the byproducts from your brain. And if you stop that, some of those byproducts are associated with the development of dementia. If you stop that, then you're not allowing your body to do some of its natural functions. So how do you know how much sleep you need? Well, if you don't take caffeine and you don't, use something pharmaceutical or whatever to help you stay awake, and you don't need an alarm clock. And on days where you don't have to get up, you get up at the same time and you don't then need a nap, then that's probably enough. But if you fall asleep as soon as your head hits the pillow, then you're probably not getting enough sleep.
Interesting about your head, like falling asleep right away when your head hits the pillow. Some of our listeners, they were talking about that just a few days back, saying some of them, they literally fall asleep like right away, and others, it takes a while to kind of settle down. But is there an optimal amount of catch-up sleep, for minimizing health risks?
So since it depends on the individual, I would say the optimum amount is when you sleep until you feel rested and you don't need an alarm clock to wake you up and you don't keep on sleeping over and over again. So it's what you're listen to your body. When your body wakes up and is not awoken, that is the ideal for catch-up sleep. Now, it may be that when you're on a vacation or something like that, when you can give yourself extra time, you sleep more, and then gradually you go down to a lower level. So I can tell you about an experiment that we did where we brought in people who at home said they sleep anywhere between 6 and 10 hours. So some people said they slept around 6 hours, and other people said they slept around 10 hours. And we brought them into the laboratory. We made sure they didn't have a sleep disorder, and they were between 18 and around 65 years of age. And we brought them in the lab, and on the second night in the lab, we had them put them in bed in darkness for 12 hours, and then they were awake for 4 hours, and then they were in darkness for 4 hours, and they were awake for 4 hours. And we did that for several days. So when they were in bed in the dark, they could sleep or not, but there wasn't anything to do. And on the first night, and the following nap time during the day, guess how much sleep people got? Remember, everybody at home said, this is all the sleep I need. I only need 6 hours of sleep. I only need whatever.
Yes.
Guess how much sleep people got on the first 24 hours in the lab when we said, you can't get out of bed?
I don't know how many. I'm so curious now.
12 and a half hours.
12 and a half hours?
Yep.
Wow.
And the second day, it was down to around 11. And after 2 days in the older people and after around 4 or 5 days in the younger people, it came down to the younger people were sleeping slightly more than 8 hours, which means they had to be in bed more than 8 hours to sleep 8 hours.
Yes.
And the older people were sleeping slightly less than 8 hours. So all these people said, I'm sleeping all I need. But when they were in bed, they were able to sleep more. And then it came back down again, which is a classic, what's called a homeostatic response, where you don't have enough. You overshoot and then you come down.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
But by the end, if they could sleep because they were bored, they would do that. But even if you're asleep for 8 hours and I'm making you stay in bed for 16 hours, that means they were lying awake in bed in the dark with nothing to do for 8 hours a day. So you can't sleep when you're not tired. And it was also interesting that the people on the first day said, oh, I feel so much more alert, because they'd sort of forgotten what feeling alert feels like, even without caffeine.
Wow. What a telling study. So if we talk about things like obesity and type 2 diabetes, which you brought up earlier, Dr. Klerman, how is that connected with sleep?
So people are still trying to work. That's an excellent question, first of all.
Okay.
People are still trying to work out the exact underlying biochemistry and physiology involved. We do know from a series of great studies done by Eva and Kauder and her colleagues at the University of Chicago a while ago, where they brought in healthy people and they gave them into the lab and they only let them sleep for 5 or 6 hours. And after a week, their blood chemistries looked as if they were getting diabetes. So they were otherwise healthy, but they were not given enough sleep and their body responded as if they were going to get diabetes. And there are studies, epidemiologic cross-sectional type studies that show that the less people get sleep, on average, the more likely they are to be overweight and the more likely they are to have prediabetes or diabetes. That doesn't mean it's a one-to-one association. I can't say if you're not going to get enough sleep, this is definitely going to happen, but we just know that it is more likely to happen. Now, some of that is that when people don't get enough sleep, they get hungry. If you've ever pulled an all-nighter, I don't know about you, but I wake up midnight, I'm not looking for an apple, And so some of it might be if you're not getting enough sleep, your hunger goes up and you don't tend to eat healthy foods.
Yes, that's true.
So if you're asleep, you can't eat. Your appetite goes down.
I have a question from one of our listeners, their phone number 8572 waiver, who asked this question, Dr. Klerman. In terms of night owls and early morning bird people, is there a difference in terms of the time they go to sleep versus their health? Is the question that's
really
posed.
Great question. So there are definitely early birds and there are definitely night owls. The night owls tend to have worse health, but it's not sure whether it's because they're night owls or because they're night owls trying to live and work in an early bird society.
I see.
So imagine you're a night owl and you want to go to sleep at 2:00 in the morning, but you have to show up at school at 7:00 in the morning. You're now only getting 5 hours of sleep. You're not going to do very well. But if you were allowed to go to school at 11:00 in the morning, you might do fine. So there's a question about whether it's something different about being a night owl versus being a night owl in an early bird society. It's a great question and we don't know the answer. But being a night owl is associated with things like worse grades and higher rates of a variety of diseases.
Oh, interesting. So for our final wrap-up question today, Dr. Klerman, so you're saying that it is okay to catch up on sleep during the weekends, whatever body needs. Is there anything else that we need to know in terms of sleep, whether, if too much sleep, like if you're sleeping for, let's say, 20 hours a day on the weekend, doesn't that just mean you're just not getting enough sleep during the week?
Well, there are sleep disorders.
Yes.
So there are sleep disorders in which people are in bed a long time but don't get enough sleep. So something like sleep apnea, where they're in bed and they're sleeping, but they're stopping breathing and they have to have these short awakenings in order to go to sleep.
Right.
Or there are disorders called hypersomnias where people are sleeping 16 to 20 hours a day. Well, we usually say if you are in bed for 8 hours a night for a week and you still feel tired, or if your bed partner complains that you snore or you stop breathing or you kick them, then you should see a specialist.
I see.
Because you may have a sleep disorder that is interfering with your sleep.
Indeed.
But otherwise, I usually say, sleep is free. You don't need to buy expensive equipment. You don't need to go somewhere else to do it. You don't need to learn how to do it. You just mostly have to allow yourself to do it. And that sometimes means you can't have caffeine after 2:00 in the afternoon if it affects your sleep.
That's definitely me, yes.
Yeah. Alcohol helps you fall asleep, but then can interfere with you interfere with your sleep once you're asleep. I just feel like, Alan Rechtschaffen, who's one of the original people who studied sleep, said that if sleep doesn't serve an absolutely vital function, then it's the worst mistake evolution has ever made.
Wow.
Because usually evolution means you want to defend yourself, you want to eat, and you want to procreate. And you're not doing any of those when you're asleep. And yet every organism that we know has sleep, or every animal type organism we know has sleep or sleep-like behaviors. And therefore, evolution has kept us doing it. It must be doing something good.
Yes. I was going to let you go, but we're getting in so many questions. So I'm going to squeeze in one more, Dr. Klerman. Second chapter, that's their username, asks, how about splitting up your sleeping hours? Is it okay to sleep 3 hours here and then maybe 5 hours there to get the 8 hours? Is that okay?
So we usually say no. We say take a nap if you don't get enough sleep at night. So if you're like a shift worker and you can't get all the sleep you want, but it's better to have all your sleep in one consolidated sleep episode and only nap if that isn't enough. Because otherwise, you're setting an alarm clock. And when you're asleep, you go through patterns of non-REM and REM sleep, different kinds of sleep, and you're now disrupting that pattern by setting an alarm to wake up at 3. So it's better to have one consolidated at night and only nap if you need to later.
Oh my goodness. The questions are coming in strong still, but we're going to let you go. Thank you so much for coming on air with us and sharing such interesting information with our listeners. Take care, Dr. Klerman.
Thank you very much. Bye.
All right, bye.